02:17 hours, Eastern Ukraine. The night sky was silent. Then the ground began to tremble. Satellite feeds confirmed it. A massive armored convoy was crossing the border. Dozens of tanks, heavy vehicles, and troop carriers, all painted in dark green, moving fast under cover of darkness. They were North Korean tanks, sent to reinforce Russian lines. But what they didn't know was that Ukraine had been waiting for them. Every move, every mile, already mapped and marked for destruction. What happened next would stun the world. Stay until the end to see how Ukraine turned this invasion into ashes. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell. More real stories of modern warfare await. The war in Ukraine had already stretched into its third brutal year. The front lines were constantly shifting. Small gains, heavy losses, and endless drone battles filled the days and nights. Ukraine's army had grown smarter, faster, and more connected, but Russia's need for manpower and machinery was growing desperate. Their old tanks were burning faster than they could replace them. That's when reports began to surface, shipments of North Korean tanks heading west. It started quietly. Satellite images showed rail convoys leaving North Korea in late autumn. At first, analysts thought they carried ammunition. But as the weeks passed, new intelligence confirmed something bigger. Several dozen Chonmaho tanks, North Korea's modified version of the old Soviet T-62, had been shipped to Russian territory. Crude but functional, these tanks were part of a secret arms deal between Pyongyang and Moscow. By February, Ukraine's intelligence service, known as the GUR, had solid proof. Using satellite feeds and intercepted communications, they learned that a convoy of these tanks was being prepared to move into occupied eastern Ukraine. The plan was simple: send the North Korean armor through a weak section of the front to break Ukraine's defensive lines. But Ukraine was ready. Its officers had learned the rhythm of Russian movements, and this time they saw an opportunity. Instead of blocking the convoy, they decided to let it come in, to draw it deep into Ukrainian territory, into an area already prepared for an ambush. The chosen ground was near Kreminna, in the Luhansk region. It was forested terrain, full of narrow dirt roads and hidden ridges, perfect for concealment. Over several days, Ukrainian engineers mined likely approach routes, artillery batteries repositioned under camouflage nets. Reconnaissance drones hovered high above, invisible to the naked eye. Infantry anti-tank teams with Javelin and Enlaw missiles spread out in hidden positions. Everything was silent, waiting. The order from Kiev was clear. Do not engage early. Let them commit. By March 12th, the convoy began to move. More than 30 armored vehicles rolled out from a logistics base near Luhansk. Each one was painted with Russian markings to blend in with existing units. Ukrainian intelligence tracked them through satellite updates and signals intercepts. Even the road dust was analyzed, confirming their size, speed, and fuel status. For 2 days, the convoy moved west, escorted by Russian supply trucks and a handful of armored personnel carriers. Drones kept watch from high altitude, feeding real-time video back to Ukrainian command. Every stop, every refuel point was logged. Ukraine knew exactly where they would be, and when. Inside Ukraine's field headquarters near Siversk, commanders laid out the final ambush plan. Artillery batteries from the 40th Brigade would strike first, cutting the lead and rear tanks. Anti-tank teams would then fire on the center column, trapping them in what the soldiers called a steel corridor. Once pinned, loitering drones and precision artillery would finish the job. It was a high-risk plan. If the timing failed, the convoy could break through. If the ambush started too early, the tanks might turn back. But if it worked, it would send a message far beyond the battlefield. As the night of March 14th approached, Ukrainian troops took their positions. Artillery tubes were loaded. Drone operators checked their feeds. Anti-tank gunners watched the road through thermal scopes. Everyone waited in silence. Then, at 0:02 WOW hours, the first engines were heard. The low metallic roar of armored tracks echoed through the forest. The convoy had entered the kill zone. In the dark command post, a single word came through the radio. Confirmed. The trap was ready to spring. At 02:11 a.m., the first tank crossed the midpoint of the ambush zone. Its headlights were off. Only the faint glow from its exhaust pipe broke the darkness. The North Korean crew inside had no idea they were being watched from every angle, by eyes in the trees, by drones in the sky, and by satellites far above the earth. Ukraine's artillery commander waited for the signal. Then at 02:13 a.m., the order came through the encrypted radio. Thunder 1. Fire. A split second later, the night exploded. The first volley of 150 mm shells slammed into the front of the convoy. The lead tank, struck directly on its turret, erupted in a flash of fire and steel. Shrapnel tore through the vehicles behind it. 2 seconds later, more shells hit the rear column, blocking the road with burning wrecks. The convoy was trapped. Inside the forest, Ukrainian anti-tank teams sprang to life. Hidden in ditches and behind dirt mounds, they aimed their javelin and NLAW missiles at the dark silhouettes crawling forward in confusion. The missiles streaked upward before diving down, slamming through the thin armor of the North Korean tanks. One after another, the machines burst into flames. The first 5 minutes were chaos. Russian radio traffic filled the air, panicked voices shouting in both Russian and broken Korean. The crews tried to reverse, but the road behind them was blocked. Some gunners fired blindly into the trees, but their rounds hit nothing. The Ukrainian teams had already moved to new positions, reloading in silence. At 02:19 a.m., a Ukrainian Bayraktar TB2 drone entered the area, streaming live thermal footage to the command post. It showed what the soldiers on the ground could not see. Dozens of hot targets burning in a line through the forest road. Commanders watched calmly, directing artillery to hit survivors trying to flee on foot. By 02:25, Ukrainian electronic warfare units jammed the convoy's communications. The enemy could no longer call for air support or reinforcements. They were isolated, surrounded by fire, trapped by precision. Then came the second phase. Loitering munitions, small silent drones armed with explosives, were launched from several kilometers away. They hovered above the battlefield, scanning for movement. When a surviving tank tried to move, it was marked and destroyed within seconds. On the ground, one Ukrainian platoon advanced slowly, clearing the wreckage. They moved in pairs, covered by machine gunners and drones. Every few meters, another explosion sounded as ammunition inside the burning tanks cooked off. The heat was intense. Diesel fires lit up the night sky in orange and red. Trees burned, smoke rose high, and the smell of metal and fuel mixed with the cold air. Soldiers described it later as hell in slow motion. By 03:00 a.m., the convoy was gone. 27 tanks destroyed, the rest abandoned or immobile. Dozens of crew members had been captured, dazed and silent. Most didn't even understand what had hit them. Their equipment was outdated, their tactics obsolete, and their training poor. They had never faced a coordinated ambush with drones, electronic warfare, and precision artillery working together. For the Ukrainian troops, it was a rare, clean victory. Not a single friendly casualty was reported. Their timing, patience, and coordination had turned the enemy's own movement into a trap. By dawn, drone footage showed the full scale of the destruction. A 2-mile stretch of road littered with burnt armor, black smoke still rising into the morning sky. The footage spread quickly across military channels. Analysts identified North Korean Chonmaho tanks among the wrecks, clear proof of Pyongyang AS involvement in supplying Russia. Within hours, the story reached the media. North Korean tanks destroyed in Ukraine ambush, read one report. But what the headlines missed was how deliberate it all was. Ukraine hadn't stumbled upon the convoy, they had waited for it. They had studied its route, predicted its timing, and planned every move. By the end of the day, Ukraine's defense ministry released an official statement. Enemy armor from foreign origin entered our land. None left it. But what happened that night wasn't just a battlefield success. It was a message to two nations at once. To Russia, it showed that Ukraine's intelligence could strike anywhere, anytime. To North Korea, it was a warning. Sending old tanks to a modern war doesn't change the outcome. It only adds names to the wreck list. To understand how Ukraine crushed the North Korean tank convoy so completely, you have to look at the technology and planning behind the operation. Every part of the ambush, from the first intercepted message to the final explosion, was driven by precision, timing, and modern warfare tools that North Korea, AS, and even Russia's equipment simply couldn't match. Let's start with the tanks themselves. The Chonma-ho, or Flying Horse, is North Korea's main battle tank. It's based on the old Soviet T-62, a design from the early 1960s. Over the years, North Korea upgraded it slightly. Thicker armor, a better fire control system, and sometimes even laser range finders. But underneath it was still a relic. It used steel armor that couldn't stop modern anti-tank weapons. Its night vision systems were poor. Its communication radios were outdated. Against an organized army with drones, satellite feeds, and precision artillery, it was hopelessly outclassed. Now compare that with what Ukraine used. The Ukrainian ambush relied on a networked battlefield, meaning every part of the force was connected through encrypted communication. Artillery crews, drone operators, and infantry teams could all share live data in seconds. The command post could see everything happening in real time. The ambush used a mix of NATO-supplied and Ukrainian-built weapons. The 155-meter artillery shells were fired from M7-77 howitzers, long-range guns capable of striking targets more than 20 miles away with GPS precision. These guns were guided by drones that sent real-time coordinates. Each shell was placed exactly where it was needed, cutting the convoy's front and rear in seconds. The anti-tank teams on the ground carried FGM-148 Javelin and NLAW systems. These are fire-and-forget missiles. Once fired, they lock onto a target and climb high before diving down on the weakest part of a tank, the top armor. The Javelin's warhead can punch through 600 millimeters of steel, more than enough to destroy a Chonma-ho instantly. Then came the drones, the silent killers of modern warfare. The Ukrainian forces deployed Bayraktar TB2s, Leleka 100s, and small commercial drones modified for surveillance. Some carried small explosive charges. Others simply relayed video. The TB2, flying miles above, acted as the eye in the sky, while smaller drones provided local visuals to ground teams. These drones operated even at night, using infrared and thermal imaging to spot targets invisible to the human eye. But perhaps the most important element of the ambush was electronic warfare. Ukraine has developed strong capabilities in jamming and intercepting signals. When the convoy entered the kill zone, Ukrainian EW units activated powerful jammers that disrupted Russian and North Korean radios. The convoy lost contact with its command center, leaving them blind and deaf. No help could be called. No retreat could be coordinated. All these systems worked together through what S called network-centric warfare, a modern military strategy where every weapon, sensor, and soldier shares information in real time. This is what made the ambush so deadly. While the North Korean tanks operated like it was 1975, Ukraine fought like it was 2025. The terrain also played a big role. The forests around Kreminna were ideal for concealment. Ukrainian engineers had mapped the area using LiDAR scans and digital elevation models, allowing them to choose perfect firing zones and fallback routes. Every tree, hill, and trench was plotted. Nothing was left to chance. Even the timing of the ambush, 02:13 a.m., wasn't random. Ukrainian commanders knew that most tank crews would be at their lowest alert level at that hour. Fatigue, darkness, and limited visibility gave Ukraine the edge. When the first shells hit, confusion took over before the enemy could even react. After the battle, military analysts examined the wrecks and confirmed what Ukraine already knew. The Chonmaho tanks were poorly equipped for modern warfare. Some didn't even have active protection systems, which could have intercepted incoming missiles. Many had cheap radios that jammed easily. Their night optics were outdated. They never stood a chance. The success of the operation came from discipline and coordination, but also from technology. Ukraine's military had evolved under fire. Every ambush, every engagement had taught them how to combine artillery, drones, and data. This was the result: an entire armored convoy destroyed without losing a single soldier. In military terms, this is called overmatch, when one side's technology and coordination are so superior that the enemy can even respond effectively. It's not about having more firepower, it's about using it smarter. For Russia and its North Korean partners, the ambush near Crimea was a harsh lesson. Tanks built for old wars can't survive in the new battlefield, one ruled by precision, data, and drones. And for Ukraine, it was proof of how far they'd come. From a nation struggling to defend itself to one capable of executing complex, high-tech operations under pressure. By sunrise, the battle was over, but its impact was only beginning. The Ukrainian ambush didn't just wipe out a convoy, it sent shockwaves through military circles around the world. Satellite images released that morning showed a narrow dirt road turned into a graveyard of steel. 30 tanks and armored vehicles lay burned, blackened, and twisted. The precision of the strike was unmistakable. Analysts studying the footage saw no signs of random shelling or chaos. Every hit was deliberate. Every vehicle had been struck where it was most vulnerable. Within hours, news outlets began reporting what had happened. "Ukraine destroys North Korean tank convoy," one headline read. Western intelligence confirmed the tank's origin. It was the first verified instance of North Korean armor being used in the war. For Russia, this was deeply embarrassing. They had quietly accepted Pyongyang's offer of aging equipment, hoping no one would notice. Now the entire world had proof, and it was burning on camera. The diplomatic fallout came fast. South Korea condemned the transfer, calling it a dangerous step toward escalation. The United States described it as proof of an emerging axis of authoritarian supply. Even China stayed silent, a sign that it did not want to be associated with the failed operation. For Ukraine, morale soared. Videos from drone footage were shared across social media and military channels. Soldiers who had taken part in the ambush were praised by name in internal briefings. The operation became known informally as the Crimea convoy trap. Commanders described it as a textbook example of patient defense, waiting for the enemy to walk into your fire rather than chasing them. But the victory was more than symbolic. It had real effects on the battlefield. Russian armored movements in eastern Ukraine slowed sharply in the following weeks. Convoy commanders became more cautious, changing routes frequently, wasting fuel and time. The fear of another hidden ambush hung over every operation. Ukraine's intelligence service, the GUR, released limited details about how they tracked the tanks, just enough to show that no foreign hardware could hide from them. Western allies, including the US and the UK, praised the coordination of artillery and drones. A Pentagon official even called the operation a glimpse into the future of land warfare. As the smoke cleared, Ukrainian engineers moved in to recover what was left. Some wrecks were hauled away for study, others were left as reminders of what had happened. A few days later, Ukrainian troops planted their flag near the road, a quiet sign that the area was back under control. The destruction of the North Korean convoy became more than a battle report. It became a statement that imported power could not break Ukraine's will. The old machines from Pyongyang had come to support Moscow's invasion, but they had instead become proof of its failure. And for the Ukrainian soldiers who waited in silence that night, it was simple. They had done their job. They had turned patience, intelligence, and precision into victory. When the fires finally died out near Kreminna, all that remained were twisted hulls and silence. What began as another Russian supply movement ended as one of the most humiliating defeats involving foreign armor in recent years. But beyond the destroyed tanks, this battle told a deeper story, about the future of warfare and about the mindset of those who fight it. The North Korean tanks had come thousands of miles to fight a war they didn't understand. Their crews, poorly trained and under-equipped, were thrown into a battlefield that had already evolved beyond them. They came expecting a fight of steel and gunpowder. Instead, they faced a network of data, precision, and silent observation, a battlefield where drones replaced scouts and where artillery struck with surgical accuracy. It was more than just a tactical failure. It was a clash between two eras of war. On one side, an army still using strategies built for the 20th century, heavy armor, mass movement, raw force. On the other, a nation that had learned, through necessity, how to fight smarter. Ukraine's soldiers didn't rely on numbers. They relied on information, timing, and technology. That night showed what modern defense looks like. It's not about who has the most tanks, but who sees first, who reacts faster, who connects every element. Eyes in the sky, guns on the ground, and minds at the center. But it also revealed something about resolve. Ukraine had no reason to fear old steel and borrowed armor. They let the enemy come closer because they trusted their preparation. They didn't panic. They waited. And when the moment came, they struck with precision and calm. In war, that mindset can be more powerful than any weapon. The ambush near Kreminna became a story told in briefings and classrooms, not only for what was destroyed, but for what it proved. That in this new age of warfare, victory belongs to those who can adapt, who can combine courage with calculation. And for the soldiers who stood in the dark that night, watching the enemy burn, there was no celebration, only quiet pride. They had done what they had to do, not just to survive, but to remind the world that in Ukraine, every invasion has a price. That is how one convoy, one night, and one ambush sent a message heard across the globe. Old war machines can still move, but they can no longer win.